Hello everybody, this is Dumpster Cat with another Pioneer video. In this one we have a really exciting spoiler from the Brothers' War in the form of Misery's Shadow. Whenever I see a 2-drop from these spoilers, I always get really excited, at least in the black and green colors, because in BGX midrange in Pioneer we really don't have many good choices in terms of the 2-drop creature slot, and so any creature that is 2 mana and is, powerful in some way, I'm going to be looking at it and going to be analyzing it. And so we have, a perfect example here in the form of Misery's Shadow. I think this card is really interesting to talk about. In my eyes, like just at first glance, it's not strictly better or strictly worse than a lot of the other options we have in BGX midrange right now. And so I think that, in this video, let's try to dive into how this card can be applied to midrange in our colors and see if it's going to be worthwhile to test out and to play. And so just to explain the card really quickly, it's a 2-mana 2/2. It has the clause if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead, and then it has the classic Shade ability in Magic where it can pay a colorless to get it +1/+1 until end of turn. And so that first clause is very unique, at least in the Pioneer format right now. The big card that comes to mind that has this ability is Kalidas, and we already know that Kalidas is a very powerful card. Obviously it has other synergies with removal spells and gaining value, but besides that, this clause is very unique and very powerful, and so that's why I kind of got really excited when I started looking at this card. And then we have the added benefit of it having the Shade ability, and it is worthwhile mentioning that as a 2-mana 2/2, it does die to a lot of removal. It of course dies to Fatal Push right off the bat, dies to Stomp, also dies to Play with Fire or any other sort of burn spell in the format. And so it is pretty fragile, but if you're going to be playing this on turns basically 3 or above, you're most likely you're going to be wanting to keep up mana while you play this card, just to have some insurance if you think your opponent has some sort of damage-based removal spell, and so you're able to pump this card as a result. And so now that we know what the card does, we have to ask ourselves the question, what is this card good against in the format and why should we play it? So at least in terms of the Mono Green Devotion matchup, it is really good against Old Growth Troll and Cavalier of Thorns. Being able to dodge the die triggers from both of those cards is actually surprisingly really important, at least in mid-range decks, because that's where a lot of their value is attained, and a lot of the 2-for-1 potential in their favor is attained. Being able to get back a Karn or another Cavalier or Storm the Festival off of the Cavalier of Thorns die trigger is just really kind of backbreaking for us mid-range players. And so with Misery's Shadow, clause of obviously exiling the creature when we kill it instead of it just dying is really important in that sense. Same thing with Old Growth Troll, stopping them from either ramping or just getting another creature out of the deal is really important in that matchup. Elsewhere in the format, this card is good against Kroxa, obviously. Kind of uniquely good against Arc-like Phoenix. Obviously it's not going to be a Dauthi Voidwalker where if the opponent discards it, it's not going to get exiled because it only says if a creature opponent controls dies, exile it instead. If this was like a straight up Dauthi Voidwalker clause where if any creature gets put into the graveyard, then exile instead from anywhere, then that would be really insane. But in this case, with Arc-like Phoenix, it does have to be on the battlefield. However, that's okay in most cases, I would believe, because we're going to have a lot of interaction as a mid-range deck, and we can just kill it, and then it'll be dealt with permanently. So I think that's not too much of a bad deal for us. I think that's pretty worth it for us. And then it's great against Greasefang, I think, for obvious reasons. Being able to exile the Greasefang from the graveyard from the battlefield is quite relevant, especially with Can't Stay Away in the format. Other cards that come to mind, Extraction Specialist, although like kind of a weaker card in the format. It could seize play in obviously the mono white humans deck and others sort of like Orzhov mid-range decks that want to recur value from the graveyard, and Misery's Shadow just completely negates that ability. or not completely negates it, but is probably going to negate it if you're able to establish the shadow early on and then kill their little creatures thereafter, exiling them and then or disallowing your opponent from being able to get any value off of the specialist. And the next question we have to ask ourselves when analyzing Misery's Shadow is, what cards can we take out in our mid-range deck already in the 2-drop creature slot so we can make space for the Shadow, and is that worthwhile doing? So I've put the 5 most common 2-drop creatures, or pseudo creatures in the sense of Ranger class, out here. I think that these are really powerful cards already, and so it's kind of tough, in my opinion, to place Misery's Shadow in place of one of these cards. I think that Scavenging Ooze has a lot of really bad synergies with Misery's Shadow, not allowing us to grow the Skoos whenever we kill their creatures. Is kind of a problem because they're going to be exiled already. However, I do think it works pretty well alongside Groomflayer, Underdog, and to a kind of lesser extent Pack Leader. I think, it doesn't have any problematic synergies with Underdog or Flare, so I like that there. And Underdog, in my opinion, isn't too powerful, so I think we could kind of maybe put in 1 or 2 shadows in place of the Underdog if we're playing Underdog in the first place, which, in that sense, it's kind of uncommon to play Underdog. However, I do like how Shadow works alongside Pack Leader, just because Pack Leader's green mana is going to be we have to distort our mana base just a bit to accommodate Pack Leader, and so the pump ability on Shadow being colorless is really nice in that sense. And then same thing with the Ranger class, leveling up is really nice and works well alongside the Shadow, of course. Having a greater density of creatures in the deck for the level 3 ability is obviously really nice. But in my opinion, the main thing that's lacking from Shadow is its inability to create card advantage for us. We see that, at least in the case of Underdog, Pack Leader, and to a bit of a lesser extent Grimflayer, these cards all gain us card advantage or card selection in some way, and even Ranger class, of course, right? They all gain us card advantage in some way, and they kind of prolong the late game inevitability of our plan in a more efficient manner. And Misery's Shadow just doesn't really provide that for us. And so this is why I kind of think that perhaps this card is, if not main deckable, perhaps in the sideboard, or just perhaps not at all. I think this is obviously a really, really nice inclusion. Perhaps could be a really nice inclusion into the deck as a whole, if more graveyard-centric cards are put into the format and do become prominent, where we want to be trading with their creatures, killing their creatures, things like that. But, I think at the end of the day, this card is just a bit too underpowered and gets outclassed by other cards just like Kalidas that are able to shore up a lot of our aggro and mid-range matchups just a lot more efficiently than Shadow. And Shadow only dealing with creatures on the battlefield is a bit problematic in terms of our abilities to deal with Greasefang and Phoenix. And so although we have the potential of Shadow being a really, really big creature in the late game, I think that we already have enough tools in our toolbox right now as a mid-range deck in the black and green colors to where we don't really need Shadow that much. And I think that with the 2 drops I have here on the screen, combined with Kalidas and perhaps other types of graveyard interactions such as Graveyard Trespasser and Cemetery Prowler, Shadow is probably not too necessary, and as a result, probably not going to be seeing play, unfortunately, because I really do like this card. It has really, really cool art, and I always, like I said at the beginning of the video, I always like to see a new 2-drop in our colors. And so, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts down below about this card and about mid-range in general, how you think this card applies to mid-range, and if you thought that my ideas were relevant, important, or if you have something to try to change my mind about, I'd love to hear it. Really want to foster a good sense of community within this channel. So really don't be afraid to comment down below your thoughts. And other than that, consider subscribing if you like this sort of content, like the video, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.